Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In this session, we will continue with chapter 7.1, in which we will discuss more about basics arrays, and we will go through a couple of examples, writing Java programs in which we need to handle arrays operations. So we have the following question. The question says, write a Java program to do the following. Write a Java program. We need one class with one main method to do the following. Prompt the user to enter the number of employees in a company, which will be stored in a variable named n. Declare an array. The name of the array is employee salary of size n to represent the employees' salaries, and ask the user to enter and fill the array. Count and display three things: the average salary, salaries below average, number of employees below and above the average. And we have sample input and output. For example, we will ask the user at the beginning, enter number of employees. So if the user says, I need 4 employees, I have to create an array of size 4. And then we will ask the user to enter 4 salaries. So we will enter 4 numbers. For example, these are the salaries. Then the output, the first output, I need to find the average. So I will say average salary, and we will find the average. And then we have to find salaries below average. So we will have to find the salaries below average. And if the average is 772, then if we go through the numbers, the only one that is below average is 500. So we will output 500.45 as below the average. Also, we will continue number of employees below and above the average. So we will count how many employees their salary is below the average and how many of them above the average. In our case, only 500 is below. That's why we have the count as 1. The other 3 salaries are above. That's why we have the count as a 3. So the first thing I have to do is I have to ask the user for how many employees. Then we have to declare the array and ask for values. So let's start step by step. We will ask the user for number of employees. We will declare the array, we will read the values, and then we will continue with the remaining of the program. So usually this is the header we start. Import Java utility scanner. We have public class, we call it employee demo, public static void main, and then we will start our coding. Because we will need to ask the user to enter values, so I will have to say scanner, let's call it input equals new scanner, and we have system.n. And then I will need to declare a variable n, integer n, and the main aim of n is to represent how many employees. So let's have a comment here. This is to represent the number of employees. Now let's ask the user for how many number of employees we have in our company. So we will we need an output and input. So we will ask the user, please enter number of employees, and then we will do the reading. So I will say n equal input dot next integer, because we know that the number of employee will be an integer. So this was the first step. According to the description, the first step was declaring n and reading the number of employees. So let me just put the number here. So we know that this is actually for reading the number of employees. Now we need to do the second step. The second step we need to do is we need to declare the array. And we need to declare the array of size n. So if n is 5, the array will be of size 5. If n is 10, our array will be of size 10. So the way we have to do it, always we have to remember what is the data type of our array. According to the question, we need to save salaries, and salaries of type double, so we will say double is the data type. We have array, so we need a bracket, and we will call it salary, and then equals new double, and between the brackets I'll have it as n. Just let me check with the name if they prefer another name, salary, or if this is okay. So according to the question, they needed to be salary of size n, so this is okay, we are doing good. Just keep it capital E. Now we did this step. The second step we have to do is we have to ask for values. So this was a step 2, but this is step 2a. Now let's call this as step 2b, as we need to ask for salaries. So what we will do, we will have a for loop, and we will say for integer I equals 0, I should go up to the end of our array. So we can simply say n, or we can say salary.length. So let's keep it n for this question as a practice, and we will say I plus plus. And then what I have to do inside the loop, simply I'll have to say go to my array, which we call it as salary, equals input dot next double. And I have to remember to say next double because the array we created is of type double. Now we have a mistake here, which is I need to save always the data in a specific location. So I have to remember the brackets I. I need a message to say please enter salaries. I don't need it with each iteration of the loop. I need it only once before the loop. So I will keep it before the loop over there, and we will say system.out.println and we will say enter salaries. So we have now the message, and we have the loop, and we will read the values. Now, what is expected next according to the question? According to the question, we need to count and do the following: the average salary. Salary is below average, and number of employees below and above. So let's do step number 1, which is only the average salary. If it works fine, we will go and do the other steps. So here, how to calculate the average? We know that always to calculate the average, we need the sum, and then we divide the sum over the number of employees. So here, whenever we do reading of a value, we have to add it to the summation. And that's why before the for loop, I need sum equal 0. Inside the loop, I will have to say sum plus equal, and we will say salary at location I. Now we have two statements inside the for loop, and that's why it's a must that we should have a bracket. So we should have the opening brackets of the for loop, and we should have the closing bracket. So whenever we have a new reading, we will save it in the array, and then we keep adding it to the sum. Now we need to define the data type of the sum. Is it integer, double? Always we define sum the same type of the array, and that's why we have to define it as double. Now when we define it as double, we will keep doing the summation. Once we finish the for loop, then we have to calculate the average. So outside the for loop, I will have, let's have a message here. This is to calculate the average. And we will say, let's call it average equal, and we know that the average usually sum over how many numbers you have. We have n representing the number of employees. Again, I have to specify the data type of average, and it should be as double. So we will calculate, and also we will display the value of the average. And to display the value of the average, simply we need system.out and let's call average equal, and then the variable we have. So far what we did, we asked the user for how many employees we have. Then we created the array of size n. We ask the user to enter the salaries, and then it depends on the value of n. We will keep reading the values, save them in the array, and we will add them to sum. Once we finish, we will calculate the average by dividing sum over n, and we will display the average. So before we continue, let's compile and run this program to make sure it works properly, and then we will continue with the other requirements. So this is our program. We have it here, and we will try to compile and run. So here the first message, enter number of employees. Assume I have only 3 employees. So it will create an array of size 3, and it will ask me to enter these 3 numbers. So let's say, let's have small numbers like 10, we have 20, and we have 30. Now the average, it will say the average is 20. So now we know our program works very well. Let's continue with the second requirement. According to the question, the second requirement is we have to output salaries below the average. So I have to go through all the salaries, and I have to compare them with the average. If they are below, I have to output the value. So here we will just continue with our program. And because I have to go for each value, it means I should have a for loop. And I will have integer I starting from 0. I should go up to n, and then I plus plus. And then let's have the opening and the closing brackets. And then I will mention that go and check. Let me just put it up there. So I will say here, go and check if the array, which we name it as salary, location I as below the average. And we have this variable. This is representing the average. So if we have a value that is below the average, then all what we need is to display this value. So let me just have an output here, and I will say system.out.println, and this is the value that I need to display. I need a message beforehand saying salary is below average. That's why we need a message before the for loop. Salary is below average, and it will go with the loop. Whenever we have a value below the average, it should output this value. So let's compile it. Just forget the semicolon here. Now enter number of employees. Let's assume still we have 3 employees. I have 10, 20, and 30. Now it says the average is 20. So it will go and do a search. Which of these 3 numbers below 20? It's only one number, which is 10. So our program is working very well. Now we will continue with the third requirement. The third requirement, it says you have to output how many employees, their salaries below and above the average. So if this was original, we have 4 employees where the average is 700 and we have only one number below 700. So we will say below average is 1 employee, above the average we have as 3 employees. Now in our case here, I have to do again a loop, or I can use the same loop. So this is totally is up to you. Let's do it as a separate loop. So I will have a loop, and here I will do the same condition. If employee of I is below the average, and instead of saying system.out.println, what I need a counter, and I'll have to say this counter plus plus. So let's call it below, and we will say plus plus. Else, we will have a message that's saying if the employee at location I is greater than the average. So we will have almost the same condition, but we will change the operator from smaller than to greater than. And here we will say above plus plus. And of course we need to define below and above. So I should have here integer below, and this is equal 0. I should have integer above, and this is equal 0 as well. So we have 2 variables. Initially they are 0. Whenever we have a salary less than the average, I will increment below. Whenever we have a salary greater than average, then we will increment above. At the end of the loop, I have to output a message to output the counters. So we will say system.out.println number of employees with salaries below average equal, and I will have to output the counter below. And I will repeat the same one, but for above. And this will be as above. So let's try to compile and run. Enter number of employees. Let's assume we have 3 employees. We have the salaries as 10, 20, and 30. So it will say here the average is 20. The salary is below the average. I have only one number, 10, below the average. So here it will say employees with salary below average is 1, because this is only the one below the average. Salaries above the average, again 1, because we have only 30. So 20, because 20 is the average itself, that's why it was not counted as above or below. So this is the program that was requested. It was started by declare n, then ask the user for n. This is to represent number of employees. Declare your array of size n, and remember this n because always you need the size of your array. And then ask the user for values. So that's why you need a system.out before the loop, and then you need a for loop. Inside the for loop, you will say employee salary bracket I, read it from the keyboard. And because we need to do summation, I will do summation within the same loop. Once we will finish, we will have to output the average by saying average equals sum over n, and we will do the output over there. And then here we will say to do the second step of salaries below average, I need a loop. and I will have an if condition, and I will say if it is below the average, then do the output. And then to do the counting of how many we have above and below, I need two counters. I need a for loop, and inside it I will have else and else if it is below the average, and if it is above the average, we will just increment the counter. At the end, I have to display the values that we have. So this is how this program will work, by declaring the values and then moving with it step by step in order that you should have all the values over there.